The SEAL gym was a place of relentless intensity, a crucible where sweat and determination forged warriors. It was 1998, and the air inside the Coronado training facility hummed with the clanging of weights, the sharp commands of instructors, and the low grunts of recruits pushing their bodies to the limit. The gym wasn't flashy, no polished machines or mirrored walls. It was raw, utilitarian, with cracked concrete floors and rusted dumbbells that had seen decades of abuse. For the fresh-faced recruits of Bud's Class 224, this was their proving ground, a place where dreams of becoming a Navy SEAL were either realized or shattered. Among the chaos, he was easy to overlook. A black man, lean and wiry, somewhere in his late 40s or early 50s, moved silently through the gym. His name was Clarence, though most just called him the Janitor. He wore a faded gray jumpsuit, the kind that blended into the background, and his hands were calloused from years of gripping mops and brooms. Clarence's job was simple: keep the gym clean. He swept up the chalk dust, wiped down the benches, and hauled out the trash without a word. To the recruits, he was part of the scenery, no more notable than the pull-up bars or the faded American flag on the wall. But to Petty Officer Second Class Ryan Carter, a 22-year-old recruit from Iowa, there was something about Clarence that didn't sit right. Ryan was a farm kid, broad-shouldered and earnest, with a knack for noticing details others missed. Maybe it was the way Clarence moved, too fluid, too deliberate for a man his age. Or maybe it was the way he never seemed fazed by the chaos around him, as if he'd seen worse. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that Clarence was more than he let on. It was a Tuesday evening, just past 1900 hours, when Ryan first saw it. The gym was quieter than usual, most of the recruits having dragged themselves back to the barracks after a grueling day of log PT and ocean swims. Ryan lingered, working on his deadlifts, determined to shave seconds off his next timed run. Clarence was there, as always, pushing a broom across the far corner of the gym. The janitor's jumpsuit was unbuttoned at the collar, and as he bent to pick up a stray towel, the overhead lights caught something on his neck, a tattoo. Ryan squinted, his barbell resting on the floor. The tattoo was small, no bigger than a silver dollar, but unmistakable, a trident, its prongs sharp and black, with a coiled snake wrapped around it. Ryan's heart skipped. He'd seen that symbol before, in the manuals and briefings. It was the insignia of the SEALs, but not the modern one. This was older, from the Vietnam era, when the teams were still called UDTs, underwater demolition teams. Only a handful of men bore that mark, and they weren't the kind who swept floors. Ryan's curiosity burned. He wanted to ask, but something about Clarence's demeanor, quiet, almost guarded, made him hesitate. Instead, he watched. Over the next few weeks, Ryan made a point to linger in the gym, observing the janitor from the corner of his eye. Clarence never spoke unless spoken to, and even then, his answers were short, his voice a low rasp. But there were clues. The way he carried himself, shoulders back, never slouching. The way his eyes flicked to the door when someone entered, assessing in an instant. And once, when a recruit dropped a 45-pound plate with a deafening clang, Clarence didn't flinch. Everyone else jumped. Not him. Ryan started asking around, discreetly. The other recruits didn't know much. Just some old guy, one said. Been here forever, said another. The instructors were no help either. When Ryan mentioned Clarence to Chief Petty Officer Malone, a grizzled instructor with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, Malone just shrugged. He cleans. That's all you need to know, Carter. Focus on not drowning tomorrow. But Ryan couldn't let it go. One night, after a particularly brutal day of Hell Week, Ryan found himself alone in the gym again. His muscles ached, his hands were raw from rope climbs, and his mind was frayed from sleep deprivation. Clarence was there, mopping the floor near the squat racks. The trident tattoo was hidden now, covered by the jumpsuit's collar. Ryan, too tired to overthink, decided to take a chance. Hey, Clarence, he called, his voice hoarse. The janitor paused, leaning on his mop, and looked over. His eyes were dark, unreadable. That tattoo on your neck. It's a SEAL thing, isn't it? The gym went still, the only sound the faint drip of a leaky pipe. Clarence didn't move, didn't blink. For a moment, Ryan thought he'd crossed a line. Then, slowly, Clarence set the mop against the wall and walked over. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, and studied Ryan like he was sizing him up. "Where'd you get the idea I got a tattoo?" Clarence's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Ryan swallowed, his mouth dry. "I saw it, couple weeks ago. It's the old UDT trident, right? From Vietnam." Clarence's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of surprise, maybe, or recognition. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a rag from his pocket and wiped his hands, slow and deliberate, like he was buying time. Ryan waited, his heart pounding. Finally, Clarence spoke. "You're observant, kid. That's good. Means you might survive this place." He paused, glancing at the empty gym. "But you're asking questions you don't need answers to. Focus on your training. That's what matters." Ryan wanted to push, to demand more, but the weight of Clarence's words stopped him. There was authority there, quiet but undeniable. He nodded, feeling like he'd been dismissed by a commanding officer. Clarence picked up his mop and went back to work, the conversation over. But Ryan couldn't let it rest. The next day, he went to the base library, a squat building with flickering fluorescent lights and shelves of outdated manuals. He spent hours digging through old records, looking for anything on Vietnam-era SEALs. The UDTs were legends, frogmen who swam into enemy waters with nothing but a knife and guts. Their missions were classified, their names often buried. But Ryan was stubborn. He found a grainy photo in a 1971 Navy yearbook. A team of UDT operators, faces smudged with grease paint, standing on a riverbank in the Mekong Delta. One man, lean and wiry, stood at the edge of the group. His face was half-turned, but the tattoo on his neck was clear, a trident with a coiled snake. Ryan's pulse raced. The man looked younger, harder, but the resemblance was uncanny. Could it be Clarence? The yearbook didn't list names, only unit designations. UDT 12, SEAL Team 1. Ryan cross-referenced the unit with other records, but the trail went cold. Most of the files were redacted, marked, classified, in bold red stamps. Back at the gym, Ryan watched Clarence with new eyes. The janitor's silence felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of secrets. Ryan noticed other things too. The way Clarence's hands, rough as they were, moved with precision when he tied a knot in a trash bag. The way he'd sometimes pause near the recruits, listening to their chatter without seeming to. Once, when a fight broke out between two exhausted trainees, Clarence stepped in, separating them with a grip that looked effortless but left both men wincing. Ryan didn't ask about the tattoo again. He didn't need to. The pieces were coming together, even if the full picture was still out of reach. Clarence wasn't just a janitor. He was a ghost, a relic of a war most of the recruits barely understood. And Ryan, for reasons he couldn't quite name, felt like he'd stumbled onto something bigger than himself. Something that would change the way he saw the SEALs, the gym, and the quiet man who swept its floors. Ryan Carter's obsession with Clarence grew like a slow-burning fuse. The SEAL gym, with its sweat-soaked mats and relentless rhythm, became more than a training ground. It was a puzzle, and Clarence was the missing piece. Ryan, now halfway through Bud's Class 224's Hell Week in 1998, was surviving on grit and 3 hours of sleep a night. His body was battered, his mind a haze, but the mystery of the janitor kept him sharp. That trident tattoo, glimpsed under the harsh gym lights, was a splinter in his thoughts. He couldn't shake the image from the 1971 Navy yearbook, the wiry UDT operator, neck inked, standing on a Mekong Delta riverbank. Was it Clarence? And if so, why was a man like that mopping floors in Coronado? Ryan kept his questions to himself. The other recruits were too focused on not ringing the bell, quitting, to notice anything beyond their own pain. The instructors, like Chief Malone, were walls of stone, offering nothing but barked orders and punishing drills. Clarence himself was a fortress, his silence a moat Ryan couldn't cross. Since their brief exchange about the tattoo, Clarence hadn't acknowledged it again. He swept, mopped, and vanished into the background, his gray jumpsuit a kind of camouflage. But Ryan was a farm kid, raised on fixing broken machinery and tracking stray livestock. He knew how to be patient, how to watch and wait. His chance came during a rare lull in training. Hell Week was winding down, and the recruits who hadn't quit were given a half-hour to eat and rest before the next evolution. Ryan, his hands blistered and his wetsuit still damp from a midnight surf torture session, slipped into the gym. It was empty except for Clarence, who was restocking towels near the weight racks. The janitor's movements were methodical, almost meditative, and Ryan noticed something new, a faint scar, thin and white, running from Clarence's left ear to his jawline. It was the kind of mark a knife might leave. Ryan approached, his boots squeaking on the concrete. "Clarence," he said, keeping his voice low. The janitor didn't look up, just kept folding towels. "I found a photo. UDT 12, SEAL Team 1, 71. Mekong Delta. Guy in it had your tattoo." Clarence's hands paused, just for a second, before resuming their work. He didn't respond, but the air felt heavier, like the moment before a storm. Ryan pressed on, his exhaustion loosening his tongue. "I'm not trying to pry, but, were you there? Were you one of them?" Clarence set the last towel on the stack and turned to face Ryan. His eyes, dark and deep-set, held no anger, only a kind of weary resolve. "You're still on that, huh, Carter?" His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Told you before, focus on your training. Digging up old ghosts won't help you swim faster." Ryan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being brushed off, not when he'd come this far. "I'm not digging for nothing. I just want to know. You're not like the rest of us. I can see it. The way you move, the way you don't flinch. You were a SEAL, weren't you?" Clarence let out a breath, almost a sigh, and leaned against the weight rack. For the first time, he looked older, like the years had caught up in a single moment. "You're a stubborn one," he said, almost to himself. Then he straightened, his gaze locking onto Ryan's. "All right, kid, you want a story, I'll give you one, but you listen, and then you let this go." Ryan nodded, his heart pounding. Clarence glanced at the gym's entrance, as if checking for eavesdroppers, then spoke in a low rasp. "I wasn't a SEAL, not the way you think. Back in '68, I was a kid from Mobile, Alabama, barely out of high school. Got drafted. Navy gave me a choice. Swab decks or try for something harder. I picked the hard road. Ended up in UDT 12. Ryan's eyes widened. The underwater demolition teams were the precursors to the SEALs, elite frogmen who cleared beaches and swam into enemy territory. Clarence kept going, his voice steady but distant, like he was recounting someone else's life. Vietnam was a different kind of war. No front lines, no rules. We'd go upriver, just a handful of us, to blow bridges, scout VC camps, pull out pilots who got shot down. Sometimes we didn't come back. He touched the scar on his jaw, almost absently. Got this in '70. Ambush on the Bassac River. Charlie had us pinned. Lost 2 men. I swam out with a wounded lieutenant on my back, 3 miles through mud and leeches. That's what the tattoo was for. Not glory, just proof we were there." Ryan was silent, the weight of Clarence's words settling over him. He'd read about Vietnam, seen the grainy footage, but this was different. This was real, raw, carved into the man standing in front of him. "Why are you here?" Ryan asked finally. "Why the gym? You could be teaching, leading. You're a hero." Clarence's laugh was short, bitter. "Hero. That's a word for politicians and movies. I did my job, came home, world moved on. Navy offered me this gig after I got out. Steady pay, no questions. Suited me fine." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "You think being a SEAL is about medals. It's about the men next to you. The ones who don't make it. You carry them, always." Ryan wanted to ask more, but the gym door swung open, and a group of recruits stumbled in, their laughter breaking the spell. Clarence picked up his towel stack and turned away. "That's enough, Carter. You got your story. Now go be better than I was." For the rest of Hell Week, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about Clarence. The janitor's words echoed in his head during the endless runs, the freezing swims, the moments when quitting seemed easier than going on. He saw Clarence differently now, not as a mystery, but as a man who'd carried a war's worth of ghosts and chosen a quiet life over glory. Ryan noticed small things. The way Clarence would leave extra water bottles near the recruits who looked ready to collapse, or how he'd linger near the weakest swimmers during pool drills, as if ready to jump in. Ryan didn't speak to Clarence again, not directly. He was too focused on surviving Bud's, on proving he could make it. But he watched, and he learned. Clarence never sought attention, never boasted, yet his presence was a steady anchor in the gym's chaos. Ryan began to understand what Clarence meant about carrying the men who didn't make it. It wasn't just about Vietnam. It was about the recruits who rang the bell, the ones who'd never wear the trident. Clarence was there for them, too, in his own way. By the time Ryan graduated Bud's, bruised but unbroken, he'd made a decision. He wouldn't tell anyone about Clarence's past. It wasn't his story to share. But he'd carry it, like Clarence carried his ghosts. On graduation day, as Ryan stood in his crisp whites, the seal trident pinned to his chest, he saw Clarence in the back of the gym, sweeping. Their eyes met, just for a moment, and Clarence gave a small nod. It was enough. Ryan never saw Clarence again after Coronado. He went on to serve in SEAL Team 3, deploying to places he couldn't talk about. But he never forgot the janitor with the trident tattoo, the man who'd shown him what it meant to be a SEAL, not through words, but through a life lived in the shadows. And years later, when Ryan was the one training recruits, he'd tell them to watch the quiet ones. Because sometimes, the real warriors were the ones who swept the floors.